He was completely puzzled by their apparent lack of concern for the seriousness of it. He was unaccustomed to resolving conflicts with rifles, and the odds against them seemed overwhelming. Old Hicks understood the expression on his face and solemnly stroked his goatee. "Not used to this kind of thing, huh?" he finally asked, his stubborn old eyes narrowing. "Guess we're in a bit of a pickle, aren't we?" "Well, I'm not so sure about that. You see, me and Stutter have been sort of looking for something like this to happen for a long time, and we've consequently figured it out to a pretty fine point. When Farnham and his group come strolling up here, they aren't going to have it all their own way. Let me tell you, partner. Do you see that straight face of rock over there?" He rose to his feet, pointing across his shoulder. "Well, that's got a front of 30 feet, and slopes back about as far, with a shelf hanging over it like a roof. Best natural fort ever I see, and only one way of getting into it, and that's a difficult climb. Well, we've stocked that place for a siege with food and ammunition, and I reckon 4 men can hold it against the whole county until hell freezes over. It's within easy rifle shot of both their cabin and their mine, and that Biff Farnham is very likely to get another shock when he comes tramping up here to wipe out the little Yankee. Old Bill Hicks hasn't been prospecting for 30 years and holding down claims with a gun without learning something about the business. I'm ready to challenge this Farnham at any game he wants to play. Damn if he can't take his pick, law or rifles, and I'll give him a lot of trouble either way." No one spoke for a long while, the 3 men apparently occupied with their own thoughts. To Carlton it was a tragedy, picturesque, heroic, the wild mountain setting providing a strange dignity. Brown finally cleared his throat, preparing to speak, his large hand slowly rubbing his chin. I sort of wish those women weren't here," he stuttered doubtfully. The engineer glanced up in sudden astonishment. "Women?" he exclaimed. "Do you mean to say you have women with you?" Hicks chuckled behind his beard. "Sure, we have all the comforts of home. Nice place for a picnic, isn't it? But I think that those girls will have to take their chances with the rest of us. At least I don't see any opportunity now to get rid of them. I'll tell you how it happened, Mr. Carlton. It would take Stutter here too long to tell the story. Only I hope he won't get angry if I mention his girl along with the other. He's becoming very touchy, is Stutter, and I'm afraid he'll shoot me. Love is a difficult thing when it takes hold of a fool. Well, these 2 ladies came up the trail this morning just before daylight. Nobody invited them, but they thought they had a purpose in the wilderness. I wasn't in favor of organizing a reception committee and voted to send them back downhill, being a bit afraid of that gender. But it turns out that without my knowledge, Stutter here had become accustomed to their company. And what did he do but come into the argument with a gun, cursing and swearing, insisting that they be received as honored guests. Oh, he's obsessed. He will probably go down to San Juan as soon as the road is clear and buy a sign that says, "God bless our home," to hang on the cabin wall, and a doormat with "Welcome" on it. That Stutter going crazy just because a little black-haired, slender girl flirted with him. What a fool. Well, one of those 2 was Stutter's catch, a high-kicking Mexican dancer from San Juan. I won't tell you what I think of her for fear of getting shot. She had another performer with her, a very attractive one, too, as far as I could tell in the dark. Well, those 2 girls were pretending to be looking for you. They wanted to warn you about Farnham or some other nonsense. You were down there in the mine just then, so that's the whole of it up to date. Where are they now? In the cabin over there, sleeping, I guess. Carlton turned quickly toward Brown, his lips trembling, his eyes becoming serious. "Who was it with Mercedes?" he asked sharply. "Did you find out her name?" She told me down in San Juan," replied Stutter, trying hard to remember. "It was N. Norvell." With the mention of the word, the young engineer was walking quickly toward the cabin. Chapter 18. Through the single uncovered window, Alyssa Ornish saw him approaching and tightly gripped the frame, trembling violently, almost tempted to flee. This was the moment she had dreaded so much, yet the moment she couldn't avoid unless she neglected her duty to this man. In a split second, the battle had been fought and won. The die was cast. She turned quickly towards her unconscious companion, gripping her arm. "Mr. Carlton is coming, Mercedes. I must see him alone this time." The Mexican's large black eyes looked up in wonder at the flushed face leaning over her, noticing the heightened color and visible embarrassment. She stood up, her quick glance through the window revealing the figure of the engineer striding swiftly towards them. "Oh, yes, miss, that's all right. I'll go see Mike. He's more fun than those who make love." There was a rustle of skirts and sudden disappearance, just as Miss Ornish heard the sound of a soft knock on the front door. She stood there, breathing heavily, her hands clasped on her chest, until the knock was repeated twice. Her voice completely failing her, she pressed the latch, stepping back to let him in. The first swift, questioning glance into his face terrified her into an impulsive explanation. "I was afraid I arrived here too late to be of any help. It appears, though, that you didn't even need me." He grabbed the hand which, somewhat unconsciously, she had extended towards him. He was startled by its unresponsive coldness, trying in vain to perceive the truth hidden away beneath her lowered eyelids. "I'm afraid I don't entirely understand," he responded solemnly. "They simply said that you were here with a warning message for me. That's all I knew just a moment ago. I can't even guess the meaning of your message, but I appreciate the sacrifice you made for my sake." "Oh, no, really, it was nothing," she said, feeling bewildered by the excitement. "It was no more than I would have done for any friend. No one could have done less." "So you admit to being a friend at the very least?" "Have I ever denied it?" she replied, almost indignantly, finally looking directly at him. "No matter what I may appear like, I can certainly claim loyalty to those who trust me. I don't wear a mask off stage." As she spoke those impulsive words, she seemed to comprehend their full significance, to see his doubt about their truthfulness reflected in his eyes. "Then," he said slowly, carefully weighing each word as if his life depended on the right choice, "there's nothing being hidden from me? Nothing between you and this Farnham that I don't already know?" She stood clutching the door with pale cheeks and parted lips, her body trembling. This was the moment she had intended to speak with courage, to reveal the entire wretched story, relying on this man's mercy. But oh God, she couldn't. The words got stuck in her throat. The very breath seemed to suffocate her. That is something else," she managed to gasp desperately. "It belongs to the past. There's nothing that can be done now." "Yet you came here to warn me about him?" "Yes." "How did you happen to find out that my life was in danger?" She raised her eyes to his for just a fleeting moment, her face as pale as marble. "He told me." "What? Farnham himself? You've been with him?" She nodded, suppressing a sob that shook her body, which under different circumstances would have prompted him to offer sympathy. But now it only fueled his growing suspicion. He had no intention of sparing her. "Where? Did he visit you at the hotel?" She straightened her back, offended by his critical tone. "I met him after the show in a private box at the theater last night," she replied calmly. "He summoned me and we were alone for 30 minutes. Carlton stood motionless, almost breathless, staring directly into the girl's face. He couldn't bring himself to utter the reproachful words on the tip of his tongue. He sensed that the smallest misstep now would never be forgiven. There was an unsolved mystery here. Somehow he couldn't comprehend her or understand her motives. In the brief pause, Alyssa Ornish regained some self-control, realizing how this man must perceive her. With a pleading gesture, she gently touched his arm. "Mr. Carlton, I truly want you to believe me, to have faith in me," she began, her soft voice filled with emotion. "Only God knows how much I value your friendship, how much I wish to preserve it untarnished. Maybe I haven't always done what's right. It's not always easy, perhaps not always possible. I might have been mistaken in my understanding of duty, but I've tried to do what seemed best. There are things in my past that I intended to disclose to you fully and honestly before we parted ways. I thought I had enough courage to tell you today when I came here, but I can't. I can't. At least answer me one question honestly, without evasion. Do you love that man?" He had to ask that, had to know. Everything else could wait. Immediately she stood before him completely still, a slight blush returning to her cheeks under his intense gaze. Then she looked directly into his eyes, and he peered into the depth they revealed. "I don't," she said firmly, her voice filled with determination. "I despise him." "Have you ever loved him?" "I swear to God, no." There was no doubting her. The truthfulness of her words was evident in her trembling lips and upturned face. Carlton breathed a sigh of relief, his furrowed brow relaxing. For a moment he was speechless, struggling to regain control of himself. Goodness gracious, would he ever understand this woman? Would he ever uncover the depths of her true nature? Would he ever separate the false from the real? The deepening, perplexing mystery only fueled his ambition and strengthened his unwavering determination. He had the instinct that assured him she cared. It was for his sake that she had braved the night and Farnham's disapproval. So what was keeping them apart? What was the insurmountable barrier between them? The man within him rebelled against such an intangible adversary. He longed to confront it directly, to engage in a physical battle. Despite his promises, his heart protested. "Alyssa, please explain all of this to me," he pleaded sincerely, reaching out his hands towards her. "Tell me because I love you. Tell me because I want to help you. It's true that we haven't known each other for long, but surely the time and opportunity have been enough for both of us to learn a great deal about each other's character. You trust me. You believe in my word. Deep down in your heart, you're starting to love me. I believe that, little girl. I believe that, even as your lips deny its truth. It's the instinct of love that tells me because I love you. I may not know your name, the story of your life, who or what you are, but I love you, Alyssa Ornish, with the passionate love of a man. So what stands between us? What is it, God help me? I could fight against realities, but not against ghosts. Do you think I cannot forgive, cannot excuse, cannot erase a past mistake? Do you think my love is that insignificant? Don't underestimate me. I am a man of the world, and I fully understand the temptations that we all face. I can let the past stay in the past, satisfied with the present and the future. Just tell me the truth, the complete truth, and let me confront whatever obstacle lies ahead. Alyssa, Alyssa, this is a matter of life or death to me." She stood staring at him, her face worn and tired, her eyes filled with anguish. Suddenly she sank to her knees beside a chair, and with a moan hid her face in her hands. "Alyssa," he asked, daring to touch her trembling hair, "have I hurt you? Have I done wrong by speaking this way?" A single sob shook her slender, bowed figure, her face still concealed. "Yes," she whispered weakly, "you have hurt me. You have done wrong." "But why?" he insisted. "Isn't my love deserving?" She lifted her head then, resting one hand against her disheveled hair, her eyes misty from tears. Deserving? Oh God, yes, but so useless, so utterly powerless. Carlton walked to the window and back again, his hands clenched, the veins visible on his forehead. Suddenly he knelt beside her, clasping her one free hand within both of his. "Alyssa, I refuse to believe," he declared firmly. "Love is never useless, never without power, in this world or the next. Tell me then, once and for all, here before God, do you love me?" She wiped away the tears from her eyes, her fingers unconsciously tightening their grip on his hand. "You can find your answer in my expression," she replied slowly. "Though I cannot speak it aloud, my eyes reveal the truth." "Cannot? Why on earth not?" He struggled to speak, his voice not entirely failing him. "Because I have no right to. I am already married," she choked out. His head drooped lower, his hair casting a shadow over his face. Carlton, his lips pressed together and pale, stared at her, struggling to comprehend. A moment later he leapt to his feet, one hand covering his eyes, slowly grasping the weight of her confession. "Married," he exclaimed, his voice trembling. "Dear God, you? Who is your spouse? Farnham?" Her bowed head sank even lower, as if silently confirming his suspicion. He heard a muffled sob escape her lips. Suddenly she looked up at him, rising unsteadily and gripping the back of the chair for support. "Mr. Carlton," her voice grew stronger with each word, "it pains me to see how deeply you feel. I wish I could bear the burden of this mistake alone, but I cannot bear your contempt or have you believe me heartless and unworthy. We must part ways now and forever. There is no honorable alternative. I tried so hard to make you leave me before. I accepted that job at the theater, hoping it would repulse you. I am not to blame for this. Truly, I am not. No woman could have fought against fate more fervently. But I couldn't summon the courage to confess the whole truth to you. Perhaps I could have done so at first, but I realized the necessity too late, and then my heart failed me. There was another reason I don't need to mention now, why I hesitated, why such a course became doubly difficult. But I am going to tell you everything now, because I want you to leave at least respecting my womanhood. He didn't reply, didn't comment, and the girl looked down at the floor. You asked if I ever loved him, she continued, speaking slower, and I told you no. That was the truth as I see it now, even though there was a time when the man fascinated, confused me, like a snake fascinates a bird. I have since learned what love truly is, and I understand now that my earlier feelings for him were fake, just worthless. Please be patient while I tell you how it all happened. It's a difficult task, yet maybe you'll think better of me once you know the whole truth. I'm a girl from Chicago. There are reasons why I won't mention my family name, and it's unnecessary. But my parents are wealthy and have a good standing. I received my early education from private tutors, so beyond my small, limited world of fashionable and restricted life, I knew nothing of real life until I was sent to a well-known boarding school for girls in the East for a broader education. Looking back, I think it was a bad choice. The school was close to a big city, and the rules were very lenient, so I was surrounded by temptations that I wasn't prepared to resist from the moment I arrived. In a fancy living room, at my mother's friend's house, I first met Mr. Farnham. She paused when his name was mentioned, as if saying it hurt her, but quickly continued her story without even looking up at her listener. I was at an age to easily be flattered by the admiration of an older man. He was considerably older than me, always well-dressed, knowledgeable in social etiquette, generous with money, and displayed a certain exciting recklessness that attracted all the girls I knew. In fact, I believe it was mostly due to their jealousy that I first accepted his attention. However, I was very young and completely inexperienced, while he was well-versed in all the tricks to captivate someone like me. He claimed to be a successful playwright and author, which greatly influenced my perception of his character and abilities. Gradually, this man succeeded in enchanting me, until I was willing to make any sacrifice he proposed. Being naturally passionate and easily influenced by appearances, confident in our social status, and ignorant of the world's deceit, I became an easy victim. He had somehow become acquainted with my brother, which only increased my trust in him. I won't go into detail about what followed. The advice from romantic girls, the false guidance from a favorite teacher, the deceptive lies and explanations that justified the need for secrecy, the fervent pleas, the promises, the relentless pressure that eventually broke my initial resolutions. I succumbed to the strain, the awakening imagination of a 16-year-old girl seeing nothing but happiness in the future. We got married at Christ Church in Boston with 2 of my classmates witnessing the ceremony. 3 months later, I fully woke up from my dream and faced the reality. She leaned against the wall, her face partially hidden, pressed against her arm. Without interrupting her, Carlton held her hand tightly and waited, his gray eyes becoming moist. He was a professional gambler, a brute, a cruel and heartless coward. The words slipped from her lips as if they were burning to be spoken. Only at the very beginning did he make any effort to hide his true self or conceal the purpose of his marriage. He tried to extort money from my people and hit me when I refused to help him. He failed because I stopped him, attempted to blackmail me but failed again, even though I protected him from being exposed. If he ever cared for me, by now his love had turned into dislike or indifference. He would leave me alone and in poverty for weeks at a time. My father tried unsuccessfully to get me away from him, but I was too proud to admit the truth. I would have been welcomed back home without him, but I refused to go. I made my own choice, made a mistake, did something wrong. I couldn't bring myself to run away from the consequences. I lived in the slums where he took me, hiding from anyone who tried to find me. Yet I was living in a living hell, my romantic dreams shattered, the despair in my life constantly growing deeper. I no longer cared for the man. I despised him, avoided being near him, yet something stronger than pride kept me loyal. I believed then, and still believe now, in the sanctity of marriage. It was what my church and my home taught me. It had become a part of my very soul. To me, that formal church wedding represented the seriousness of religion. I couldn't bring myself to break the vows I made. Divorce was an unthinkable idea. And now, he interrupted gently. She raised her head and quickly looked up. You'll think I'm mistaken, idealistic, unnatural, she admitted seriously. But I'm not released, not free. This man is still my husband, married to me by the authority of the church. I must bear the weight of my commitments. Not even love would be enough to make up for disloyalty in the eyes of God. In the profound silence, they could hear each other's strained breaths and the melodic chirping of a bird outside. Carlton, with his lips pressed together and stern eyes filled with suppressed emotions, remained still and silent. Alyssa Ornish's head slowly sank back onto her arm. He took me with him from one city to another, she continued wearily, as if speaking to herself unconsciously, staying in each place as long as the authorities would allow. He was rarely with me and seldom gave me money. We didn't argue, as I refused to engage in any verbal exchanges. He only physically assaulted me twice, but there are other ways to harm a woman, and he knew them all. I was hungry at times and poorly dressed. I had to find ways to support myself and worked in factories and stores. Whenever he knew I had money, he would take it. Money was always the cause of conflict between us. It was his obsession, not to save, but to spend on himself. My constant refusal to let him drain my father infuriated him. It was during those moments that he completely lost control and struck me. God, I wanted to kill him. There were moments when I could have, when I wonder why I didn't. Yet, in careful consideration, I couldn't break my promises. 3 years ago, he abandoned me in Denver without a word, without any indication that the desertion was final. We had just arrived there, and I had nothing. My family's friends lived there, but I couldn't turn to them for help. I truly suffered, until I eventually found a job at a large department store. I expected him to return, so I kept the rooms where he left me. I sent home 2 cheerful letters, not mentioning anything that would diminish his reputation in the eyes of my people, but keeping my address a secret in case they tried to find me. Then, unexpectedly, I had the chance to go out with Clinton, and I gladly accepted. It allowed me to divert my thoughts, work hard, and lose myself in a growing ambition. I had already let go of the past, and was firmly grasping onto the future when you entered my life, and then he returned as well. It's such a small world, so insignificant, yet filled with pain and heartache. In the silence, she glanced at him, her eyes clear, her hair held back by one hand. Please don't look at me like that, she begged. Surely you can't blame me. You must forgive. There's nothing to blame or forgive, Alyssa. It seems there's nothing for me to say or do, he replied. She slowly leaned towards him, placing one hand on his shoulder. But am I right? Will you tell me if I'm right? He hesitated for a moment, gazing down at her questioning face, his gray eyes filled with a loyalty that made her heart race. I don't know, Alyssa, he finally said. I don't know. I can't be your conscience. I need to go somewhere alone to think, but I will never come between you and your faith. Chapter 19. She collapsed onto the chair, her face fully concealed by her arms. Carlton, his hand already gripping the doorknob, hesitated and scanned the room, overcome by a sudden disgust that left him unsettled and devoid of purpose. He had been consumed by a single idea, an intense resolve to find Farnham and eliminate him. The savage was nothing more than a deranged beast who had harmed someone dear to him. He did not deserve any mercy. But now, in a sudden burst of light, he realized the complete pointlessness of such an action. Cowardly, as the man undeniably was, he still remained her husband, bound to her by unbreakable ties. Any vengeful strike that would make her a widow would undoubtedly separate the killer from her forever. Inevitable though it may be, the act was one that Alyssa Ornish would never forgive, never forget. Carlton understood this as if a sudden flash had illuminated his soul. He had peered into her hidden heart, witnessing the profound religious depth of her character. This radiant woman, with her brown eyes, would do what was morally right, even if it meant enduring self-inflicted agony. He never once doubted this truth, and it gripped him with unwavering strength. Even as he stood there, gazing back at her trembling figure, it was no longer hatred for Farnham that controlled him. It was his love for her. He took a hesitant step towards her, unsure, his heart throbbing with sympathy. Yet what could he say? What could he do? Utterly powerless to provide comfort, unable to even suggest a solution, he silently stepped back, closed the door behind him, and left her inside. He held one clear, unchanging belief under God it would not be for long. He stood there in the brilliant sunlight, still bareheaded, his gaze dreamily fixed on the expansive view of the canyon. How serene, how magnificently beautiful it all seemed. How gracefully the colors of those distant trees blended and harmonized with the brown rocks beyond. The panoramic scene slowly imprinted itself on his mind, erasing any personal animosity and replacing it with a sense of hope. In such a splendid world, hope always returns like an angel with healing in its wings, and Carlton's face brightened, the dark scowl vanishing from his forehead, all sternness dissipating from his eyes. Surely there must be a way somewhere, and he would find it. Only the weak and the cowardly can sit down in despair. Out of the prevailing silence he suddenly heard voices nearby, and the sound caught his partial interest. Just before the door where he stood, a thick growth of bushes obstructed the view. The voices he heard indistinctly came from beyond, and he cautiously stepped forward, peering curiously between the parted branches. It was a narrow section of the ledge, surrounded by walls of rock and sparsely covered with grass, with a small fire burning near its center. There was a delicious smell of cooking in the air, and 3 figures were clearly visible. The old miner, Mike, sat next to the embers, a sizzling frying pan not far away, his black pipe in one hand raised in an oratorical manner, a tin plate in his lap, his grumpy, wrinkled face twisted into an argumentative expression, his angry eyes glaring at the American opposite, who was lazily propped against a convenient rock. The latter looked like a huge, clumsy, thin man with a red and white complexion and a perfectly messy shock of blonde hair untouched by a comb. He had a long, particularly serious face, made even more mournful by unblinking blue eyes and a drooping mustache of light yellow color. All in all, he presented a picture of indescribable sadness, his wide mouth pulled down sadly at the corners, his forehead wrinkled in confusion. Somewhat to the right of these 2 more central figures, the young Mexican girl added a touch of brightness, lounging against the bank in graceful relaxation, her black eyes shining with barely contained amusement. However the ongoing dispute may have started, it had already reached a stage for the display of considerable anger. "Now, you see here, Swanska," growled the thoroughly roused Irishman passionately. "I've heard enough from you about that now. There is reason in all things, I'm told, but I don't clearly mind ever having met any in a Swede, geez. I say you're nothing better than a darned foreigner with no business in this country at all, taking the bread out of the mouths of honest men. Look at the Irish now. They were here from the very beginning. They've fought, bled, and died for the country, and the likes of you come in and take their jobs. By heavens, it's enough to rile the blood. What's your name, anyway?" "I am Nell Swanson." "Huh. Well, it's little the likes of you ever really knows about names, I'm thinking. They tell me you don't have any proper, decent names of your own over in Sweden, wherever the devil that is, I don't know, but just pick up anything handy to draw pay on." "It isn't true." "You're a liar. Bad luck to you. Haven't I had to be bunkmate with some of you dirty foreigners before now? Your sons, the whole kit and caboodle of you Nelsons and Olsons and Swansons and Andersons." "Blessed Mary. And you call those things names? If you have any other cognomen, it's something you stole from some Christian all unbeknownst to him. Holy Mother." But you ought to be ashamed to be a Swede, you miserable slab-sided heathen. My name is Swanson, it's all right, hey? Swanson, oh, you poor benighted, ignorant foreigner. And Mike straightened up, slapping his chest proudly. Just you look at me now. I'm an O'Brien, do you mind that? An O'Brien. Mother of God. We were O'Briens when the Ark first landed. We were O'Briens when your ancestors, if ever you had any, were wiggling tadpoles poking in the mud. We were kings in old Ireland, by golly, when you were a mollusk, or maybe a poker-faced baboon swinging by the tail. The audacity of people like you to call yourselves men and accept such meager pay for your labor. I bet you never had a grandfather. You're nothing but a brat, a son of a nobody, by golly. And you come over here to work for a thief, a dirty, low-down thief. Do you understand that, you long-faced scoundrel? What did you do over there? I was a shovel man for Mr. Burke, hard work. You don't look that intelligent from here. Work. With a snort, and waving his pipe in the air. Work, is it? Indeed, that's all people like you are ever good for. You lack intelligence, or else you take it easier. I once had a heathen Swedish foreman at the last chance. God forgive me for working under him. He nearly worked me to death, that ignorant foreigner. Work. Why, I'll be damned if a green Swede didn't fall the full length of the shaft one day. And when we went over to pick him up, do you know what the poor heathen said? He opened his eyes and asked, "Is the boss mad? Afraid he'd lose his job. And so you were working for a thief, were you? And why?" $2.60. Mike leaped to his feet as though a spring had suddenly uncoiled beneath him, waving his arms in wild excitement and dancing about on his short legs. $2.60. Did you hear that now? For the love of heaven. And the union wages are $3.60. You're a damn scab, and I'm going to wallop you just for luck. I must be crazy to do this job. Why would someone like you work for Mr. Hicks? Swanson's impassive face remained unchanged. He stroked the mustaches hanging over the corners of his dejected mouth. $2.60, Mike glared at him, and then at the girl, his own lips pursing. Honestly, I believe the poor guy doesn't know any better. Surely it's not for an O'Brien to be wasting his time trying to teach someone like him the great secrets of trade. It would be like casting pearls before swine, as Father Kinney says. Have you ever heard of the Bible now? I am a Lutheran. And what's that? I'm a Democrat, and damn the O'Brien who's anything else. But I never knew there were any of those other things around here. You're definitely not a prohibitionist, though, because that stuff in your bottle could cook a snake. Good Lord, it had an edge to it that could sharpen a saw. What do you think of this blabbering fool anyway, senorita? The little Mexican burst into laughter, clapping her hands in such a state of delight that it caused the unemotional Swanson to open his mild blue eyes in solemn wonder. "He's all right, I think," she exclaimed eagerly. "He's not as foolish as you think he is. No. Look, sir, he's busy eating the whole time you're talking. He has the meal, you have the fancy air. Which is better, the air or the meat, sir? Bueno, I think the laugh is on you." Mr. O'Brien, his attention suddenly brought back to practical matters, gazed into the emptied frying pan, a clear expression of bewildered despair upon his wrinkled face. For a moment, even speech failed him as he faced that scene of utter devastation. Then he rushed forward to confront the target of his righteous anger. "You damn Swede, you!" He shook a dirty fist beneath the other's nose. "Smell that? Now I know you're a thief, a low-down heathen thief. Why are you sitting there grinning at your betters?" $2.60. The startled Irishman stared at him with his mouth wide open. "Did you hear that, miss? Oh, my goodness, it's just a parrot sitting there in front of us, except it's making me lose my appetite. Oh, my goodness. I would love to hit the creature if it wasn't a mortal sin to beat a dumb animal. And he's a Lutheran. May God be merciful and prevent me from ever catching that same disease, as it would leave me like this one. What's that? What did the heathen say then, miss?" "Not a word, sir. He just winked at me as if he was flirting." "The Swede did that? Holy Mother. And with an O'Brien here to defend any decent girl. Wait until I take off my coat. It's an O'Brien who will teach him how to treat a lady. Say, Swanson, you son of a gun, you son of a sailor, you son of a... Well, I would like to tell you what you are if it wasn't for the presence of the miss." It's Michael O'Brien who is about to hit you in the eye for forgetting your manners and acting too boldly in good company. Whoop! Oh my goodness, it's the grain above the red. There was a dull noise of a heavily struck blow. A pair of short legs, waving frantically, traversed a complete semicircle, landing with a crash at the edge of the bushes. Through a rapidly swelling and badly damaged eye, the pessimistic O'Brien looked up in dazed confusion at the man already on top of his fallen body. It was a reborn Scandinavian, the fierce battle lust of the Vikings glowing in his blue eyes. With fingers like steel claws, he grabbed the Irishman's shirt collar, forcing his head back against the ground with every mad utterance. "I am Nell Swanson," he shouted defiantly. "I am Nell Swanson. I am Nell Swanson. I am a worker for Mr. Burke. I am a Lutheran. I am paid $2.60. Do you hear those things? Tam, I'll show you." With the swift, silent motion of a bird, Mercedes moved across the narrow space, squeezing her slim figure between the two contenders. Her white teeth gleamed happily, and the bright sunlight shimmered on her dark hair. Like two stars, her large eyes flashed pleadingly at the Swede's angry face. "No, no, gentlemen, you can't fight like dogs in front of me. I don't like that, and I won't allow it. Look, if you hit him, you hit me. Goodness gracious. I've never seen anything like this before." A firm, commanding hand suddenly landed on Carlton's shoulder, and he looked around to see the serious, youthful face of Stutter Brown. "There's quite a crowd coming up the trail to the Independence, and Bill wants you," he said, his calm eyes fixed on the ongoing dispute in the distance. "Something will happen soon, but I think it's best if I resolve this international conflict first." Chapter 20. The serious yet amiable giant made his way through the tangled mess of obstructing bushes and proceeded to declare peace in a casual manner. His approach reflected someone who spoke slowly but acted swiftly. With one large hand gripping the Swede, he suddenly swung that startled individual backward, fully extending him into the still smoldering embers of the fire. He held the gasping Mike down with his foot planted heavily on his chest. It happened so quickly, Swanson uttering unintelligible curses as he tried to extinguish sparks from his overalls, the Irishman cursing profanely as he became aware of the damage done to his eye, and the overwhelming odds against him. Miss Mercedes clapped her small hands in delight at the scene, her steps light as if dancing, the youthful joy in her eyes sincere and unrestrained. "Ah, Mr. Brown, you're so good. They're just like children to you, even when they fight, right?" It was great to see such things happening, just like the play. She circled swiftly up towards him, a joyful bird of vibrant colors, gently running her fingers along the bulging muscle of his arm and gazing with sincere admiration up into his face. Under the enchanting spell of her eyes, the man's cheeks turned red. He responded with a display of aggression due to his unexpected embarrassment. "That's enough now, Swanson," he commanded, the stutter mostly disappearing under the pressure of action. "This is not a continuous vaudeville show, and the curtain has fallen on your act. Mike, you old rascal, if you continue to swear while the lady is here, I will shut your words down your throat. You know me, so be quiet. There will be plenty of fighting for both of you soon, judging by the circumstances. Now both of you go away and keep quiet about it. Mike, you better do something about your eyes if you want to see well enough to take a shot at Farnham's gang." The two defeated fighters reluctantly slouched off, but the slender white fingers of the Mexican woman remained clasping the speaker's arm, her face filled with genuine enthusiasm. Brown, after pretending to watch the fighters disappear, nervously glanced down into her extraordinary dark eyes, shuffling his feet awkwardly, resembling a shy boy. Mercedes laughed from the depths of her seemingly carefree heart. "My, but it was so very impressive, sir. Look, I cannot even wrap my fingers around it. I have never seen such a strong arm before. But you don't mind, do you? You are that big and impressive all over, hey? Goodness, who can resist a woman helping such a big American?" But that's not it, Mercedes," blurted out the distressed giant desperately. I want you to love me." "I don't understand, sir." "Oh, yes, you do. Lord, didn't I tell you everything clearly enough last night? Maybe I'm not great at talking, but I think I conveyed that message properly. Can't you update that and make it sound more like love somehow?" She let go of his arm, her eyes lowering behind her long lashes, the joyful laughter fading from her lips. That was not at all nice of you, sir. Why do you always bother me like this when I am good to you? No, I told you not to ask me that so quickly again. Didn't I say that? I don't know. I only met you twice. How can I love when I have only met you twice? You've met me as often as I have met you, he interrupted, and I know I love you just fine. Oh, that's different. Very different, she said, stepping back from him with a flirtatious toss of her black head. Why not? Of course. I am Mercedes, isn't that enough? All the gentlemen say that to me. They say I'm a very pretty girl. Do you think so too, sir? The confused Brown, fully aware that his physical strength was useless in this situation, looked for an answer, though his lips only sputtered in a futile attempt to speak. So, I read that in your eyes. Then of course you love me. It's in your nature. But with me it's not so easy. No, not nearly as easy. I think maybe you are a very nice man. She playfully balanced it on her fingertips, constantly glancing up into his puzzled face. I think you are a very good man. I think you are a very strong man. I think maybe you will be very kind to Mercedes. It's for all those things that I like you, sir, like you very much. But love, that means more than like, and I'm not sure. Maybe yes, maybe no. How can I tell yet if it's true? I think the best thing is not to say it, but just think about it. Just keep it in my own heart until some other time when I am sure. Was it not so? Brown clenched his teeth with a hint of aggression, the little witch teasing him with her quick speech and playful demeanor. To his slower mind, she was like a hummingbird flitting from one flower to another, always eluding him. Maybe you think I'm not serious, he persisted stubbornly. Maybe you think I didn't mean what I said when I asked you to marry me? She glanced up, briefly meeting his intense gaze, and seemed to shrink back as if she suddenly understood the silent, unwavering strength of the man and his unwavering determination. There was a slight hesitation in her quick response, but he didn't notice. No, sir, I'm not joking. I'm not that type. I want to do what's right for both of us. I don't want to do something wrong. Do you understand, sir? Maybe you'll soon grow tired of Mercedes, and then what? Will you regret marrying me? The infatuated miner shook his head emphatically and reached out his hand towards her. No. Oh, you may think so now. You may think so very much now. But it's better if we wait and see. I know how men are, how they forget over time. Maybe I'm not as good of a woman as you think I am. Maybe I'll be moody, argumentative, easily angered. Maybe I won't like living without the excitement of the stage, the lights, the dancing, and the fun, hey? What will you do then? You'll regret marrying me. I don't want that, no. I want the man to love me always, never wishing he hadn't married me. You don't know me yet. I don't know you. Maybe we wait, we'll see. He grabbed her gesturing hands, holding them firmly in his own, but she let her hair fall across her face, partially hiding it from his eager, passionate gaze. But tell me you love me. Tell me that, and I'll let the other go. You would make me say the untrue, sir? Of course not. I want to know. Only if you don't, I'm going to get out of here. She remained silent, motionless, her revealing face shaded, only the quick rise and fall of the chest showing emotion. The man looked at her helplessly, his mouth firm, his eyes filled with sudden doubt. Well, Mercedes, he stammered, unable to control himself. What is it? She lifted her lowered head ever so slightly, so that he saw her profile, the flush on the cheek turned toward him. Maybe it's better you stay, sir. Anyhow, I don't want you to go just now. For once he proved the faster of the two, embracing her instantly, pulling her slender body close to him with a strength he failed to realize in that sudden surge of passion. Holding her in helpless submission, he pushed aside the obstructing veil of hair and covered the flushed cheeks with kisses. The next moment, breathless, but not with anger, the girl had pushed his burning face aside, although she still lay trembling within the relentless grip of his arms. I didn't say all that, sir. I didn't say all that. You're so very strong, you're hurting Mercedes. Please, sir, it wasn't meant to be this way. No, I didn't say I love you. I just said stay until maybe I know which, please, sir. Not until you kiss me yourself. And Brown, intensely aware of victory, held back the mass of black hair, his eager eyes devouring the fair face pressed against his shoulder. "One kiss with your lips, and I'll let you go." "No, no, sir." "Then I'll hold you here until someone comes." It was not love, it was just to get away. I take chances on that little girl. Their lips met and clung. Unconsciously, the girl's free arm moved upward, clasping the man's broad shoulder. For that moment, she forgot everything except the new joy of the embrace, the belief that this man loved her like no one else ever had, truly, nobly, and forever. Her face glowed as she reluctantly pulled away, her eyes locked with his, her cheeks flushed, her lips trembling. But with the separation, her resolution returned swiftly, giving her strength. "Hey, sir, it embarrasses me, but you promised, sir." Like a flash, she had somehow slipped away, evading his attempt to grab her dress, and with a quick, spinning motion she was already halfway across the open space, daring to taunt him while tossing back her long hair, the sunlight shining on her. She could never appear more delicately attractive, more flirtatiously charming. "Ah, you think I am the prisoner. It was not all about strength, sir, not all. You cannot catch me again until I love you. Not once until I love you, sir." He stumbled toward her blindly, tormented by these unexpected words of renunciation. But she danced away, always managing to stay out of reach, until she disappeared into the narrow path leading to the cabin. He could see her through the view of branches, pausing to look back and see if he followed. But you do," he called out. I know you do. Won't you just say it for me once? Say that I marry you?" "Yes, for it means the same. Anyway, say that you love me." She laughed, shaking her head so vigorously that her black hair became a swirling cloud around her. No, it's not the same, sir. Perhaps I love you, maybe not yet. That's what you need to figure out. But getting married, that doesn't prove my love for you." Oh, men, thinking that marriage is the only way to show love. No. Maybe one day I'll show you if I love you. Yes, one day I'll show you when I truly know. But that doesn't mean I'll marry you. It means more than that, you see. Goodbye, sir." And he stood alone, staring at the empty door, strangely happy, though not satisfied. Chapter 21. When Brown emerged from behind the protection of the cabin, his freckled face still flushed with the memory of his intense lovemaking, he found both Hicks and Carlton standing on the rock that had served as their breakfast table. They were gazing intently into the deep purple depths of the canyon, occasionally scanning their immediate surroundings near the hostile Independence. There was something serious in the air, and all three men sensed its mysterious presence. Hicks held the binoculars in his hands, outwardly composed, but his weathered face already showing signs of excitement as events rapidly unfolded. The increasing number of figures becoming visible near the distant shaft house and dump, along with the continuous shouting whose words were indistinguishable but loud enough to reach their ears, hinted that they wouldn't be left undisturbed for long. "I'll be damned if there weren't 20 people in that last group," Hicks muttered, slightly uneasy. "Good Lord, boys. They're organizing an army over there. I can't make sense of that kind of scheme. It doesn't seem natural. I never thought Farnham was a coward when it came to fighting, but this situation looks like it's got him scared stiff. Well, it'll take more than a bunch of San Juan tough guys to scare me. I think the current plan should be to try rushing the little Yankee." He turned around, bringing the extended tubes of his binoculars together, his gray beard sticking out in front of his thin brown face like bristles. "Oh, is that you coming back, Stutter? Thought I heard somebody walking behind me. I assume, judging from the view over there, that the party is about to begin. At least the musicians are taking their places." And he waved his twisted hand towards the distant crowd. "There's something like a regiment over there now, horse and foot, and it's safe to bet that more are coming. This event must be getting quite famous, and seems likely to attract a larger crowd than a three-ring circus. All the scum of San Juan must have received a private tip that we were easy targets. They're out here like crows hoping to pick our bones clean before the law can intervene. Well, it's going to be a tough fight, and some of them are likely to have trouble with their digestion because they'll be eating a lot of lead first. Now listen, Stutter, the safest thing we can do is get ready. You chase that whole group over there back behind those rocks, where they'll be out of the way of the Swede and the women. Do it quickly, and you and Mike stay up there with them, with your guns ready. Stay under cover as much as possible, as some of those fellows out there will have binoculars with them and will be watching us very closely. Hurry along now. Carlton and I will stay here until we find out exactly what their plan is." He turned away from his partner, facing once again towards the Independence. Then he adjusted the binoculars and handed them over to his silent companion. "Just see what you can make of it, Mr. Carlton. You're younger and your eyes should be better than mine." The young engineer, already feeling the excitement of a dangerous situation, carefully scanned the area from the partially hidden bunkhouse to the nearby ore dump, searching for any signs of life. Despite his emotions, his hands remained steady as he adjusted the lenses. "They have definitely gathered a significant number of men," he reported, still looking through the glass. "Most of them appear to be rough-looking, judging by their clothes. The majority are gathered between the shaft house and the dump, but there are about 12 or 15 near those cedars. Farnham is at the shaft house. No, he and another guy just started walking down the dump in this direction. Now they've entered the cedars and are coming straight towards us. What do you think they're up to? Negotiations, maybe?" "I have no idea," replied the old miner, staring blankly. "This whole situation confuses me. Maybe he's trying to intimidate us with his words. Farnham is quite the bluffer." The two watchers anxiously waited, leaning on their loaded rifles, their eyes fixed on the hiding cedars. Behind them, within rifle range, Brown and old Mike cautiously peeked over the rocky barricade. Suddenly 2 men emerged from the shadow of the woods and walked directly towards them across the open ridge of rocks. They seemed unconcerned, not bothering to choose their path and appearing completely indifferent to any potential danger. One of them was Farnham, standing tall with squared shoulders, his hat pushed back to reveal his clean-shaven face. The other man leaned slightly forward as he walked, his wide brim pulled low over his eyes, revealing only the tip of a neatly trimmed beard. He had a strong build, and a pistol was prominently displayed at his side. If Farnham carried any weapons, they were hidden beneath his coat. Carlton's eyes grew menacing as he watched them approach, his hands involuntarily clenching, but Hicks remained motionless, continuously chewing on the tobacco in his cheek. "Who is that with him?" he asked with curiosity. "Do you know him?" Carlton shook his head, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on Farnham. Deliberately, the 2 men climbed the low heap of ore together and emerged at the top, fully exposed to the bright sunlight. Hicks lowered his Winchester slightly, his sharp old eye peering down the polished barrel. "I'll have to ask you to stop right there, gentlemen," he said amiably, pulling back the hammer with a crisp click. "You're trespassing on my property." The 2 men came to an immediate halt, Farnham smirking unpleasantly, his hands buried in his pockets. His companion quickly pushed back his hat, as if taken aback by the command, revealing a broad, ruddy face shaded by gray whiskers. Hicks partially lowered his gun, muttering a muffled curse. "By God, it's the sheriff," he exclaimed, completely bewildered. "What are we dealing with here?" An intense silence followed, both parties staring at each other, one side startled and unnerved, the other cool and contemptuous. It was the sheriff who spoke first, standing firmly on his stout legs and calmly stroking his beard. "You probably know who I am, Bill Hicks," he said evenly, "and it might be in your best interest to lower that gun. I'm not here looking for trouble, but if it starts, I have a large enough posse over there to make things very interesting. Do you understand?" Old Hicks hesitated, his finger still hovering near the trigger, his eyes filled with uncertainty. There was some mystery in this situation he couldn't quite understand, but he was stubborn and determined. "Yeah, I know you all right, Mr. Sheriff," he responded, his tone tinged with irritation. "But I don't understand why you're getting involved in this matter. I have no issue with you or any reason to have one, but I do have a problem with that smirking guy next to you. I'll talk with you, but Farnham better go back to his own den of thieves or I'll shoot him straight through. I don't talk to his kind." The sheriff raised his hand, taking a step forward, his expression becoming resolutely stern. "Mr. Farnham happens to be here as my deputy," he solemnly declared. "I don't know anything about a fight between you two, and I don't care. I'm here to enforce the law and arrest criminals. If you decide to interfere with me and my duty, I'll know how to respond. I've faced the barrel of a gun before today, and I can assure you that Sam Hayes doesn't back down when there's a fight brewing. If there's an issue between you and Farnham, settle it like men. But right now, he's a sworn officer of the law, and when you threaten him, you threaten all of Gulpin County. Do you understand that, Hicks? The sturdy old prospector, his face flushed with anger beneath his tanned skin, unloaded his rifle and let the butt drop heavily onto the ground, his gaze shifting from the sheriff's face to Carlton's. "Well, what the heck do you want, then?" he asked grumpily. Hayes smiled, shifting his weight onto one leg. "Is there anyone in your group named Carlton?" he inquired. "Ned Carlton, mining engineer." The younger man started in surprise. "That's my name," he replied before Hicks could speak. The sheriff looked at him curiously, noticing the strong jawline and the steady gray eyes. Then he glanced at Farnham. The latter nodded casually. "So far, so good. By any chance, do you have a Swedish man here named Nels Swanson?" Hicks shook his head uncertainly. "There's a Swedish man here for sure who belongs to the Independence gang. I don't know his name." "It's Swanson," interjected Farnham cheerfully. "Those are the two guys you're after, Sheriff." The sheriff, captivated by what he saw, never dared to take his eyes off the engineer's face, yet he smiled grimly. "Then I'll have to ask you to bring out the Swedish man, Hicks," he said, with a distinct command in his voice. "Once he's here, we'll get down to business." It took a good 5 minutes before the man arrived, moving slowly and reluctantly. From his words, expressing his feelings openly to Mike and Brown, who were encouraging him, it was clear that he had no desire to be in the spotlight. The 4 men waiting for his arrival remained still, carefully observing one another. As the Swedish man, moving slowly, finally approached, Hayes took the opportunity to momentarily shift his gaze from Carlton and quickly assess the sad expression on his face, that single glance revealing the man's character to him. The Swedish man glanced uneasily from one face to another, his gentle blue eyes reflecting distress, his fingers absent-mindedly tugging at his mustache. "I am here with you guys," he sadly confessed, unable to determine which person it was that wanted him. "So I see," the sheriff admitted curtly. "Are you Nels Swanson?" The man swallowed something in his throat that seemed to choke him. This question sounded familiar. It brought back a rush of memories from his recent argument with Mr. O'Brien. His face reddened, his eyes hardened. "I am Nels Swanson," he exclaimed, swinging his clenched fist through the air. "I am Lutheran. I am a shovel man for Mr. Burke. I get $2.60. I wouldn't give a damn for you. I'll punch the guy who asks me that again." The sheriff stared at him, much like he might have examined a new and strange specimen of bug. "I don't remember asking you anything about your family history," he said calmly, casually placing one hand on the grip of his .45. "Your name was all I wanted." He tapped his coat suggestively, his gaze returning to Carlton. "Well, folks, we might as well get to the point of this, although I'm sure you two already understand what it means. I have warrants here for the arrest of Carlton and Swanson. I hope neither of you plan on causing any trouble." The young mining engineer's white teeth clenched together, his gray eyes gleaming dangerously beneath furrowed brows. Instinctively, he took a quick step forward. "Warrants?" he exclaimed breathlessly. "For God's sake, what for?" Hayes tightened his grip on the gun, partially drawing it from its holster, his eyes narrowing. "For the murder of Jack Burke," he said shortly. "Don't move, young man." There was a long moment of intense, tense silence, during which the 5 men could hear nothing but their own rapid breathing. Before Carlton, everything became blurry, unreal, the faces in front of him appearing like figments of his imagination. He felt the strong thumping of his own heartbeat, a sudden dull ache pulsating through his temples. Murder. The dreadful word struck him like a blow, seemingly paralyzing all his senses. In front of him, as if depicted in a painting, he saw that fierce struggle in the darkness, the lifeless body lying crumpled among the rocks. Murder. Yes, and how could he prove otherwise? How could he possibly clear himself from this vile accusation? Even as he still stood unsteadily on his feet, A hand pressed against his eyes as if protecting them from that terrible sight. A voice, deep and commanding, spoke out. "Mike and I have got those two troublemakers under control, Mr. Carlton. If they make a move, or if you give us the signal to go, we'll shoot them right in the middle." Chapter 22. Hayes never changed his stance, nor shifted his gaze from Carlton, his right hand still resting on the grip of his .45, his lips set in a rigid line. The engineer, the mist partially lifting from his mind, held no thoughts except for Farnham, who remained motionless, staring over his head into the black, menacing barrel of Stutter Brown's raised gun. These were Western men. They instantly recognized the power of the drop, the absolute certainty of death if they made a move. They could only wait, breathless, uncertain, for the next move in this desperate game. To Carlton it felt like an hour as he hesitated, his mind in chaos, temptation relentlessly pushing him. He saw the sheriff's face harden, determined behind his gray beard. He noticed the reckless smirk on Farnham's lips, the bruise under his eye from where he had struck him. The intense hatred he harbored for this man surged through him, momentarily driving all thoughts of mercy from his heart. Suddenly he remembered the vulnerable woman over there, easily within sight, perhaps even on her knees in supplication. It was this realization that stirred something within him. He redirected his dull gaze away from that loathsome, mocking face, his clenched hands loosening, his mind responding to a newfound determination. "Revenge is mine. I will repay, says the Lord." Like an echo, perhaps from the very prayer she was uttering, the solemn words entered his consciousness. With a pale face and trembling lips, he abruptly stepped back and raised one hand. "Don't shoot, fellas," he ordered, his voice resounding clear and purposeful. "Drop your guns, everything's fine. This is my game, and I intend to play it out alone." Farnham laughed, the quick reaction possibly affecting even his strong nerves. Carlton whirled and confronted him, the gray eyes blazing. "Damn you, you sneaky, mocking brute," he burst forth. "You thief, you woman-beater, you unspeakable jerk. I surrender to the sheriff of Gulpin County, not to you. I have the evidence to send you to prison, and I will do it, even though I put myself in the shadow of death while I bear witness to your disgraceful behavior. You think this arrest will silence me? You imagine this will make me harmless, but by God it will not. I will fight you until my last breath.